We are proud to sponsor the Ashland Leadership Academy seminars. We've been collaborating with many of you throughout the last year and hope to continue that strong partnership. Hi there. Good to be with you today and excited to share some information with you about SchoolSims. My name is Dr. Trent Grundmeyer, and I've had the good fortune of working with SchoolSims for multiple years from multiple different perspectives. In a few minutes, I'm going to share a few slides with you on some insights and the value to Sims. But before we get started, I want to give you a little bit of background and context about my experience and what I'm going to offer you today. My current role is serving as an associate professor of education leadership at Buena Vista University in Storm Lake, Iowa. Previous to this experience, I served as an assistant professor of education leadership at Drake University for 10 years, where I oversaw the principal and superintendent programs. And before that was a practicing high school secondary principal. So I want to share with you today, I'm going to bring you some context of both a practitioner and how the Sims have been and are being used. I want to share with you how we're using them to train aspiring principals and superintendents and support them in the field. And then another unique piece is I run a search firm where we hire principals and superintendents and business managers around the Midwest. And I want to share with you about how we've actually used the simulations with those experiences in hiring and retaining staff as well. Let me jump in. I'll try to be succinct, and I want to get right to the point with some key things to share with you today. I already gave you a little bit of background. I'm also going to hit on today just a few of the research studies that I've done that I think you'll find insightful. As you know, simulations are used in all sorts of things from military to medicine to aviation. And so the first question that I might beg you with is why not education if it's been used for some of these key areas in the field? We know that's important not only to train aspiring school leaders, but also retain them. And in this job market, probably more than ever, we have to retain our good educators. There's just a statistic there where right now the average principal tenure is less than 4 years. And in low income, larger systems, it's actually even less than that. So simulations can be part of engaging, supporting, preparing school leaders for scenarios that we can't even fathom, but build their capacity to lead and respond to situations. Certainly a huge cost on here. In this source from the Learning Policy Institute that's fairly recent here, they're saying the typical cost of everybody's time, postings, marketing, perhaps paying the next person more. The cost to replace a principal across the country, they suggest, is about $75,000. So when we talk about retention, it's a real thing. Maybe even more important than any of that is the value and work that school leaders do and we know is important. So I would remind you about Marzano, Waters, and McMulty work in school leadership that works. Number 20 is the highest correlate, that's situational awareness, by the way, highest correlate to student achieving that school building principals can do, and superintendents too, for that matter. And you see some of the definitions about predicting what can go wrong, being aware of groups and staff and student relationships, and trying to minimize issues so the focus can continue to be on student achievement. The Sims help do that for both aspiring and practicing school leaders so they can keep the focus, minimize the distraction, and respond to critical scenarios. A lot of that work from Walters and McNulty there was backed up by more recent Wallace research here, came out in February there, 21. How principals affect students and schools, and you can see that little chart I put on the screen around those skills that Sims can certainly bolster around people, instruction, and organization. There's Sims on all of those. And the leadership behavior around climate, instructional leadership, management, and the interactions with people. And boy, there's lots of Sims, and I'm thinking about the disruptive teacher, planning for parent-teacher conferences, just a plethora of Sims that could be used to bolster a principal's capacity to lead and support in these key Wallace research areas. So what are SchoolSims? They remind me of those books I read when I was a kid, where you would turn to a different page depending on what outcome you wanted. So if I wanted this experience, turn to page 79, or this outcome, go to this page, and then you kind of choose your own adventure. The simulations are real because you choose your adventure with feedback aligned to the standards at the completion of the simulation. But there's options, videos, and different choices that are real in every simulation. You may ask, how can they be played? Is there a best way? And I would say that depends on your audience and the context, but you can use simulations synchronously or asynchronously. There's value to doing some in person. I use them a lot when I'm teaching online via Zoom or Teams or another webinar or video conferencing platform. So they can be used in all of those, which make them pretty nimble to do. And sometimes I do it in groups, sometimes individually with students, and then have them reflect and come back. So we'll hopefully you'll get the chance to see and experience them firsthand, because they're hard to explain. Leadership sims, teacher sims, counseling sims. This is a list and more coming. I'm going to tell you about an exciting one I've just recently created. But you can see there's all sorts of different topics, and more simulations are being drafted each month. When we talk about fit, that is a real thing. This is research from Christoph, 1996. Talks about leadership fit, the fit of the organization, both the organizational fit and that personal fit. People have to like who they're working for and who is leading them. They also have to have the skills and the capacity to move an organization forward. Very, very important. One interesting thing I found from this research study by Ed Clamfuth was something around bias. Matter of fact, his study aligned to the standards talked about female board members when hiring a new superintendent tended to prioritize ethics, curriculum, skill set, by the way, and interpersonal communication skills. While male board members focused more on the financial skills, facility experiences, and leadership style. That led me to think about, in my own work in consulting and hiring principals and superintendents for districts, what bias is out there and how do we try to minimize that? So I'm very excited to tell you one of the newest sims that we have done, and I've partnered with Ken and SchoolSims, is to create a bias in hiring simulation. It is from the superintendent perspective, hiring a new high school principal, their first 6 months on the job, and the bias that the board has in the diversity of candidates and other bias that comes into the scenario. That's real, by the way. I use it with school boards. I use it with hiring teams. I use the simulation because it's safe to have the conversation around bias in hiring. Very excited to be able to showcase that simulation with you, and I think you'd find it super valuable. So just wanted to mention that that's the most recent one I've helped create, and where that simulation idea came from this original research. We certainly know different types of bias in hiring, and that's hard to address without an active or authentic simulation that helps pull it out, confront it, and then address it. As we close, I mentioned I've done some research, not just my own personal experience using simulations, both in hiring as a practicing principal and now in higher education, but you can see some of the findings that we've had in research over the years that's been published. You can see that first study, the discussions that were really stimulated critical thinking, 21st century skill for school leaders, different perspectives, and increased confidence to lead, which I think is really important. And that's back to that retention piece. A 2019 study there, simulations to make it stick, about using them actually promoted retention of long-term key concepts and information. So again, I won't bore you with research, but good research out there that I've personally done to know that simulations are a great tool for teaching and learning for both aspiring and practicing school leaders. And I hope that research backs it up. These are a couple pictures of some of my recent classes, and you can see my students not only valuing the simulations, but I think if you look at their faces there, they're actually enjoying them too. Sometimes their blood pressure even gets up because the sims are so real. We talked about asynchronously or via video conferencing software here. I wanted to just share with you some of the simulations I've done there with the transgender, playground mishap, social media, cyberbullying, girls basketball, disruptive teacher. All of those I've done via Zoom and you can see students engaged in a simulation there. So another way to leverage the Sims. Here's authentic student feedback straight from some of my students. Love the specific situations. The discussions were valuable, offering different perspectives, and that the simulations gave them a bit more confidence to lead. And again, those came out in some of my research studies. So that is a brief overview of what I want to share with you around simulations, the value that I've seen firsthand, and the value I think SchoolSims can offer you and your organization. If you do have any questions that I can answer firsthand, please reach out, let me know. And I certainly wish you the best as you're guiding your school and leading. Thanks for the opportunity.